Connie Krupp from Wellness for Life Coaching. And we're going to continue our book discussion. Again, we're still discussing the Book of Joy by the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu. And I just love this book. I can't get enough of it. So last week we talked about so far we've been talking about the first four pillars, which are keeping things in perspective by stepping back and taking a look at it, maybe talking to somebody else. I find that when I go down that rabbit hole, if I talk to somebody else about it and get their perspective and get their opinions, usually it's not as bad as what I'm thinking it is. So it really helps to talk to somebody. The next one was humility, not to put ourselves on a pedestal so that we can be knocked down. And when we are more humble, it's not so scary to be out there or to present or think we're better than. We don't have to keep up with the Joneses or whatever. The third one was humor. We talked about trying to find some joy and some humor in everything that happens and to laugh, especially at ourselves. And I'm getting much better at that. It's just so freeing, like with all of these. And then the fourth was acceptance, accept the things we cannot change and change the things we can. But the big aha is to know which ones we can change and which ones we can't. But they talk about these four first pillars are the pillars of the mind. It's more about that critter brain kind of going crazy up there and whatever. But the next four that we're going to talk about is from the heart. And these, again, I think are a little bit harder for me, they are, than the first four. And the one that we're going to talk about tonight is forgiveness. And for those of you that have heard me talk about this before, forgiveness to me is like holding on to a burning coal and trying to throw it at someone that we're mad at. We're the ones that get burned. And I keep trying to remember that when we hang on to anger, resentment, bitterness, to me, it feels like dragging you know how you see that picture of someone in prison dragging that big heavy ball with the chain on it. That's how it feels to me. It's like it doesn't do anyone any good. It's really tough. And a lot of times the people that are the closest to are the hardest to forgive because we think, oh, how could they do that to us? How could they even say that to me or feel that way or whatever? But I really want to point out what helped me, again, after we lost our son, in order to forgive this person. It was his 6th or 7th drunk driving, and he didn't have a license. He stole his sister's car, went out and got drunk, got kicked out of the tavern, and was angry. So he left and he drove through the city of Madison, where my son was a sophomore in college. And the kids are walking around on the streets all the time. And my son was studying with a friend and was going back to the dorm and was crossing actually in a special crosswalk where it's 30 miles an hour. And they think they clocked him at about 65, driving 65. And he hit our son just as he was going up over the curve. And our son hit his head on the window. I can't think of the in the front of the car and the windshield, and had some severe head injuries. And then the person left. And so the piece that really bothered me for a long time was, he was alcoholic, he was drug dependent. I know it's an illness, but he left. And that's what really kind of bugged me for a long time until I could forgive him. And what I've felt myself through some support groups and talking to other people is it helped me to separate the person from what happened. And I'll never forgive him for what happened, forgive the whole incident. It's like when I worked with children who were sexually abused. We cannot condone what happened, that's not okay. That's a wrongdoing, and we should not have to forgive that. But working on forgiving the person, because they are human. We all make mistakes. I think of, as a teenager, we drank and drove some, and luckily nothing happened. But we're all human, we all make mistakes. And when I could work towards that, that's when I could start to forgive. And it wasn't easy, but I worked really hard at it. And that's what the Dalai Lama says in this book. It really frees us from the past. I could not move on until I forgave this person, not what he did, but forgave him as a person, as an alcoholic, as a person that was very troubled himself. And he did spend time in prison, and he didn't have he was a college, he was 26 years himself. So he was in school too. And so his life changed and his family's life changed forever. But when we look at the distinction between forgiveness and simply allowing others wrongdoing. Sometimes people misunderstand and think that forgiveness means you have to accept or approve of the wrongdoing. And no, this is not the case. The Dalai Lama says we must make that important distinction. He was speaking empathically, striking one hand against the other. He said one is the actor and one is the action, and the person and what he did. And the action was wrong, and they have to be dealt with, whatever, appropriately. But the actor or the person, we can choose not to develop anger and hatred towards that person. And that's where the power of forgiveness lies. That was a real aha for me. And I learned that in Compassionate Friends, which is a support group for parents. Not losing sight of the humanity of the person while responding to the wrong with clarity and firmness. I believe in Mothers Against Drunk Drivers. I believe in much stricter laws regarding drunk driving. I hope that none of my family members ever drink and drive. And everyone knows that. Feel very strongly about that you find a designated driver if you're out drinking. But it is a lot of work to try and forgive someone, but I can say through personal experience, it was cutting that ball and chain that I was dragging around. And as I said earlier in a video, when I was so angry and resentful at that person, I could not move on. And someone asked me what will help you move on. And I said, I need friends and family to be able to talk about my son and talk about the great things he did, because I didn't want people to forget him. And I wanted to point out all of his strengths and some of his areas that were kind of silly now, but at the time, he was a falconer, and he had a hawk in our backyard. He built a mule, or whatever they call it, for the hawk. And during the winter, he had to help feed him. And so he would catch mice in summer and winter and freeze them. And one time I came home early from work, and he had my wine glass, one of my really nice wine glasses, in the sink with water in it. And the mouse was in there with his tail sticking straight up because he was frozen. And I just had a bird. I was like, oh my gosh, you can't be using my good wine glasses. Well, as we all look back, I'd give my left arm. He could have all my wine glasses now, but I can't bring them back. But there were some things that he did that, were just, now it's kind of funny. And at the time it was like, oh my goodness. But I wanted to tell people about him. It helped me. And I knew that if I continued to be angry and resentful, people were not going to want to be around me. And so I worked very hard at letting go of that anger, letting go of that resentment, and moving on, and building on that, and working very hard at our marriage, because, as I said earlier, 9 out of 10 marriages end in divorce. And we made up our minds we were going to work very hard to not let that happen. And I'll tell you, there were some very tough times because you grieve very differently. But I have some great suggestions and ideas and things of how to help couples with that. And so that's why I have this support group for parents who lost children. And if you're interested, you can email me. I have a couple of slots open on in the next group. But in the book, again, the Dalai Lama, what I love about this book is that he not only tells you the obstacles to joy, and then he gives you explains what each pillar of joy is, and then he gives you some ways to deal with it. And I think that that's just a really, really good thing. In fact, the Archbishop, Desmond Tutu, wrote a book called The Book of Forgiving. And I have not read it, but I know that it's really supposed to be an amazing book also. But in that book, he does a step-by-step process of how to get through something that's really tough for you to forgive. And it's about global forgiveness. And there's actually a challenge in there. And so what he suggests and the way he's dealt with being able to forgive someone is by, first of all, telling your story. So we have to face the truth. And that's what's so healing for me. And what's so great about Compassionate Friends and other support groups is that you can tell your story. You can tell what happened. You can tell how you've been dealing with it up to this point. And we recommend writing it down in a journal and telling a trusted friend what happened, how you were hurt, how you were betrayed, someone that you can trust, but tell your story. Tell it to a spouse, a friend. It allows you to integrate the memories of what's happened, and it helps diffuse some of that emotional connection. It's sort of like disassociating ourselves, a little fly on the wall, looking down of what happened and writing it down and journaling. And we recommend too that you write your emotions. This really made me sad. This really made me angry. And then you can, the other thing that does is writing it down is relieve some of the stress, your stress response to all of this, getting it out. It's like a pressure cooker. We have to get those feelings out. And one of the ways that he recommends you do this is to close your eyes, go back to the time and place of this emotional experience, and see the scene in your mind's eye. Now, if it's something really painful like sexual abuse or something very, very traumatic that you experienced, we recommend that you look at it from above, that you aren't being abused again, but that you can look at this little child or this person looking down on them rather than actually being in there, and take a few steps back and move away from the situation to the point where you can watch the event unfold, but as I said, from a distance, and watch the experience unfold as if it were happening to the distant you all over again. And then observe yourself, think about the emotions, think about what's going on in your mind, what your beliefs were about this. You know, as many times, if we're an adult and we were abused as a child, many of those children think it was their fault. And so we can talk about that and bring that up and talk to them and say, it definitely was not your fault. This is a very unhealthy person. There are some mental health issues. What he did was, or she did, was awful and it was wrong, but we have to learn to forgive this person in order to heal ourselves. Not he or she needs to suffer the consequences. You don't ever have to talk to that person again. You don't have to make amends with them, but deep in our heart, we have to find some way to forgive. And then it really helps to name the hurt. The Desmond Tutu says, facts are facts, but these experiences cause strong emotions and pain, which are important to name. And again, as you watch the situation unfold around your distant self, try to understand your feelings. Why did that little girl or that little boy have those feelings? What were the causes and the reasons for the feelings? And if the hurt is fresh, ask yourself, will this situation still affect me in 10 years? If the hurt is old, ask yourself whether you want to continue to carry this pain or this anger or this resentment for the rest of your life. And who is it really hurting? And then the big one is to grant forgiveness. The ability to forgive comes from the recognition of our shared humanity and the acknowledgement that inevitably, because we are human, we hurt and we are hurt by other people. Can you accept this humanity of this person, their illness, their sickness, their craziness, whatever you call it? And they'll likely hopefully can get some help, but if you don't have any control over that, the only person you can take care of is yourself. And if you can accept the shared humanity, like I said earlier, we're all human, we all make mistakes. We all might have done drinking and driving. We may have gone too fast down the highway. We may have even gone the wrong way sometimes on a gone the wrong way on a one-way. Things happen. We're human. We may be preoccupied. We could cross the center line, hit an oncoming car, whatever. Text, answering your phone, picking something up off the floor. Luckily, when we've done those things, no one's gotten hurt, but we are human. And if we can recognize that there are multiple hurts in this world, and we need to forgive and ask for forgiveness at the same time with other people, accepting our part of the human drama really can help someone. And then the last step, the fourth step, is renewing or releasing the relationship. Once you have forgiven someone or you're working on forgiving, I found that when I was working on forgiving this person who killed our son, there were days when I could be there and felt at a pretty good spot. And then there were other days that I just was so angry at him, I could have slapped him or more. But I knew that wasn't going to help me either. He was already in jail, in prison. And I never wanted to see this guy. I never wanted to say, I forgive you. But I knew that I had to, but I did not want to ever meet him. I met him in court. And I got to say what I felt he did to our family. And I felt like that was enough for me. But if you feel like it's a family member and you want to retain or renew that relationship, then again, if you can extend the olive branch and try to make amends with them, tell them that what they did hurt you and you want to forgive them, and see if they will say they're sorry. If they can't, you can say what you did was wrong. I will never forgive the wrongdoing, but because you're human, I'm going to work very hard at forgiving you. Because let's say it's a family member, a brother or a sister of my husband. I would want to work very hard at renewing that relationship for my husband's sake. It's his family, and I would want to have some peace. So depending on what the relationship is, you can either renew it or you can release it, either one. But I think it's really important to do that. And again, as I said, journaling is such an important part of this. And so I hope that you can think about someone that you want to forgive, past or present, and do it for your sake, not only for the other person, because they may or may not accept or and whatever. But I feel that for me, I was really able to move on and to heal once I was able to forgive this person. So I wish that for you. And next week, let's move on to gratitude, and we'll see you then. Thanks.